With Overwatch League Season 4 starting next week, I want to take a quick look at how the overarching meta playstyle has progressed since last season, as well as do a quick overview of the team comps that we're likely to see. The first thing to understand is that the game has continued its steady progress away from that playstyle of slower, grinding neutrals, where everyone is constantly dealing damage, healing their tanks, or getting value, to a playstyle focused almost entirely around cycling through fast and decisive cooldown trades, where clinically matching timings is much more important than putting out big numbers. The fights will still take a long time because teams will go through multiple cooldown rotations, like a monkey going through 2 or 3 Zarya bubble cycles before fully committing, but the whole team's focus is around matching their individual peaks in uptime to create options and get an advantage, then stabilizing and trying to hold that advantage during their downtime, while they heal up and get those cooldowns again. Now obviously this playstyle has been used in professional Overwatch for a very long time, but with every new patch and every new team comp, we're seeing teams lean into it more and more, with less and less focus on sustained value. And it's the teams that can best perform this quite precise matching of uptimes and downtimes, while under the pressure of an official match, that will see the most success this season. There's a lot of reasons the game is moving in this direction, but it's been heavily influenced by balance changes over the past couple of years. Shield nerfs have meant that basically any team comp can quickly crack enemy shields with focus fire, making it difficult for teams to just post up and dish out constant spam without themselves getting poked out. Instead, we're seeing these poke heroes rely more on heavy off angles and surprise peaks at the perfect time, where they can carry a fight with just 2 or 3 shots if they get that timing right. Various DPS changes have played into this too, with heroes being given more range and more escape options, enabling them to pop up on a flank and go for a play, then back out to safety once the enemy reacts to them. McCree is probably the best example here. His combat roll buffs and health pool increase really suit this style, but a lot of other heroes have had changes in favour of this playstyle as well. Remember too that if teams are spending less time chilling in main, since there are less shields to play around, it means there's less pressure on DPS players to also be in main, dealing constant damage, and so more freedom to go for these types of flanks that work really well in this kinda uptime downtime playstyle. We've also seen AoE bulk healing nerfed. No longer can Batiste and Brigitte duos put out near Transcendence level heals just by existing in the middle of their team, meaning combined with the shield nerfs, it's much easier to punish enemies that are grouped up and not in cover, which limits the time that teams can spend constantly fighting, as the damage they take slowly outpaces their healing, which forces them to find chances to quickly pause and stabilize mid-fight so they can reset their health and cooldowns before continuing. A team that has good coordinated uptime and downtime cycles will always have an advantage over a team that is trying to constantly fight, as teams can concentrate their resources into quick bursts of value that are difficult for the enemy to counter, as the enemy's resources are more spread out. On top of this, their resources are always ticking down, as they aren't finding chances to stabilize and reset those resources. You can think of this kinda like focus fire, but expanded to include all resources, health pools and cooldowns, instead of just damage. Again, this isn't really anything groundbreaking, it's just that getting that cycle right is becoming more and more important with every development in the meta. It's also important to think about the mindset that teams have with regards to resource usage, as this has been steadily changing too. One of the big lessons teams learned about this mindset was during the recent Overwatch League Season 3 playoffs, where we saw incredible performances from the Washington Justice and Seoul Dynasty as they created the blueprint for the playoffs meta. Their team comps were interesting, but the heroes they played didn't really matter. What mattered was the way that they controlled the tempo by constantly forcing the enemy to spend attention and resources responding to their plays. This could have been sneaky hog flanks in pre-fight, early ultimates to disrupt enemy setups, or almost suicidally aggressive Ana play. Again, it didn't really matter, because if you're consistently forcing the enemy to focus on staying alive and responding to your play, they can't focus their attention and resources on killing you, and you end up with this kind of snowball effect where you're able to play more and more aggressive because your control of the tempo means you have a very clear idea of the resources the enemy team has to punish you with when you go for certain plays. Basically, you know exactly what you can get away with. Meanwhile, the enemy team are in the opposite situation. Since they don't have control of that tempo, they don't know what your exact potential is each fight, so it doesn't matter if they're not really under serious threat from that hog flank or opening ultimate, because they don't know that. They don't have the time or mental space they need to figure out the appropriate response before the rest of your team takes advantage of their hesitation and the chaos you're causing in their comms. Playing like this forces bad ultimates and bad decisions from nervous players. Every team is looking to do this in their matches, and it takes a very well-trained team with a ton of confidence in each other to be able to recover from the enemy team doing this to you. Again, obviously this mindset in terms of tempo has been around for a very long time. It's why you see such dominating performances even at the top level, and also one of the main reasons you see surprising amounts of success from one-trick teams, or teams that don't appear to be playing too seriously. You know, if you're able to start fights on your terms and get the enemy to focus on your plays rather than setting up their own, then it doesn't matter too much which heroes you're on or how much you scrim, you're gonna be in with a decent chance. So it's less that this mindset is new, but more that it's becoming more and more important, especially as knowledge gaps to do with basic gameplay and matchups continue to narrow between teams. So all of this comes together to the point where almost all comps have turned into this kind of two-phase fight type deal. It doesn't matter if you're playing Rein, Monkey or Ball comps, you're opening basically every fight going slow, taking angles, clearing any flankers that are deep, while making sure that you're not in a position to get punished. Then once you're ready and have a few positions to play with, you look for a decisive cooldown trade. This could be slamming him with Zarya bubble, speed boosting him with sound barrier, or rotating your Zarya Brig Ana trio close enough to the enemy team to start brawling. Again, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that the transition between the first phase and the second phase is coordinated and ruthless. To do well in this playstyle, teams have to have a fast and clean first phase, quickly clearing flankers and getting into position without overstretching, and with clear comms about what to do next. Then, more importantly, they gotta have that ruthless transition into the second phase. Clear timing, clear target, no hesitation. It sounds simple, but when the enemy team is doing the same to you, you gotta have comm structures and full confidence in each other, or the play will fall apart. Remember too that depending on your comp, this second phase where you're committing during your uptime will only last for a few seconds before you start running out of shields, health balls and cooldowns, so teams need to be ready to find a chance to stabilize and hold the advantage they just earned while they're waiting out their downtime. Again, this is very difficult if you don't have those strong communication structures, and I expect this is where a lot of teams are going to struggle. So to look at the popular comps quickly, we have a few main ones. Again, this isn't meant to be a full breakdown of all comps, more of just an overview of the type of thing to expect at the start of the season. So first we have Rein-based comps, very popular in EU and NA. Typically here you're going to see Rein, D.Va, Kree, Mei, Lucio, Bap, but there is a lot of room to swap around with heroes like Doom and Orisa, depending on map and enemy team comp. Overall the playstyle is pretty simple. Teams clear a bit of space while checking flanks or going for safe rotations at a long distance away from the enemy. Then they start up fights from this secure position where they use very aggressive opening ultimates to gain control of the tempo and deny the enemy team chances to fight back. It doesn't really matter if your opening high noon or back window isn't perfect. If it gives you a chance to control the tempo, then use that tempo control to find an advantage in positioning or maybe for some resources like Lamp, Maywall or Rein Shield, then it's a great ultimate with tons of value. Again, remember that once that speed boost matrix and Rein Shield start to run out, teams are going to look to stabilize mid-fight around some piece of cover, where they can heal up and reset their cooldowns before committing again. The best teams with this comp are the ones that are fastest at setting up the aggressive opening ultimates, since they will always control the tempo. And of course, teams will need those clean uptime and downtime cycles with regards to stabilizing, because if that cycle isn't clean, you're going to be bleeding picks or wasting resources. This comp also works fairly well into dive and poke-based comps, not just because you have options for swaps to heroes like Tracer or Moira, but also because teams are really figuring out how to run that tempo playstyle into comps with lots of flankers. The Rein team will still play that traditional counter-dive style of pathing together and looking to pressure the objective, but they will also always look to take risks to try and aggressively punish enemies that are trying to stage. This means you might have Maze hiding on the path of the enemy Hammond flank, McCree's going for surprise peeks with D.Va Matrix, but most often you'll see Rein teams not be afraid to aggressively commit ultimates just to catch one enemy. All of these plays are a way for the Rein team to control the tempo and catch enemies off guard. Teams will always look to push out with sound barriers, mails or D.Va bombs, instead of just sitting there and letting the enemy set up a good fight. Disrupting the enemy setup like this is the main tool Rein comps have versus those dive and poke comps, especially now that shields and healing aren't as strong as they used to be. So the Rein is played mostly on the tighter maps like King's Row and Lijiang Control Center, all ones without much high ground for dive comps to abuse. Whether teams will want to run this exact comp or not is fairly comfort dependent though, as it's one of those comps that is very difficult to get results with in the mirror if the enemy is just a bit better. Right now in NA and EU though, it's the closest thing to a meta comp, with most teams running variants of it on most maps. Second, we have the Monkey-Zarya dive comps, very popular in APAC and typically with Monkey, Zarya, Tracer Echo, Brig, Ana. Again, there's a fair amount of room for DPS swaps, mostly to Ashe or Sombra, depending on the map or team preference. This team comp also opens slow in pre-fight, with heroes clearing a bit of space on the flanks and making room for their backline, while still staying safe themselves. Once they've got a bit of positioning, they'll start cycling soft dives using the Zarya bubble. The monkey will jump in to take enemy attention, the bubble allowing him to cover long distances without getting booped or chunked midair. Then once he's skirmished for a bit and his own shield is down, he'll take a chill until he's been healed and his Zarya has another bubble, before obviously going in again. Usually he's not diving for kills, just to take attention and zone out the enemy backline for a few seconds, creating a short time window that his team will typically use to do one of three things. First, the backline of the Zarya, Brig and Ana might rotate through enemy LOS to a better position, while the enemy can't spam them down. Since this comp doesn't have Matrix or Speed Boost, this is really the only way you can get away with rotations when you're close to the enemy poke heroes. Obviously, if you're further away, Monkey doesn't have to dive, he can just kinda bubble on top of you and walk through with the backline. For the second option, that backline might already be in a decent position, and so instead they use that zoning dive to close distance with the enemy, where they can then start brawling with Zarya and Brig. Pretty much every fight will end like this, but they'll definitely be looking to do this early whenever they have grab or rally. And finally, Monkey's team will be looking to hard focus any targets that get split off from their team when Monkey goes in, as they won't be able to get heals and resources for that short time window that the Monkey creates. Remember too that every time Monkey soft dives like this, it's building Zarya energy, primal ult charge, and more importantly, nano ult charge. This comp is very reliant on cycling not just the Zarya bubble engages, but cycling nano and primal too, as it gives the comp a very strong opener to the fight that's super easy to farm. The teams that will do best with this comp are the ones that are always ready to get value from that time window that the Monkey dive gives them, whether that's by rotating, closing distance to brawl, or by killing an isolated target. It's also important that teams are recognizing when they can't hard commit and need to go through a few cooldown rotations before they have their ults or positions to win the fight, while also recognizing when they can hard commit on the first cooldown rotation because they already have good positions and flanks, or already have the ultimates they need like Nano, Primal, or Grav. This comp works decently in most situations and can be adapted to a lot of maps and enemy comps. You can play a Merciana poke variant versus rush comps, or a Sombra Tracer variant versus ball comps. It's difficult to say how exactly this comp and the Rein comp match up into each other, since the regions are very split on team comps at the moment, but I'm sure we'll find out soon. Right now though, it just seems to be map and hero pool dependent, as both comps have a lot of potential for individual carries as well as swaps when versing against each other. Similar to the Monkey comp, we are also seeing people play Ball and Zen in a more pokey playstyle based on holding flanks and angles, sometimes played with a Zarya who looks to bubble the ball engage, then start a brawl using her Brig and Zen, and we see this more on the tighter maps like Eichenwald. But teams also sometimes run a Sig who plays slow and spams, working with his Ashe and often a Mercy to lock down angles and just blow up anyone in their LOS. We see this more on the wider maps like Busan Sanctuary. This comp goes through similar cooldown rotations to the Monkey comp, except that the cycle depends pretty much only on the cooldowns and health ball of the Wrecking Ball. The ball is typically looking to work with Tracer in pre-fight to clear a flank and set himself up, while his team is staying safe. Then he'll look to go for a play with the Tracer to open the fight. This could be a straight engage on the enemy backline or sneakily contesting the point. The important thing is that this happens at the same time as the main core go for their own play, whether that's peeking their angles or closing distance to brawl with that Zarya Brig Zen trio, especially as they've got Rally or Grev. This comp is very adaptable to whatever the enemy team runs, but it seems to be going a little out of fashion in favour of the Monkey comp. Obviously if the map or team's hero pool suits this comp, then it still gets good results, so expect teams with great Ball, Zen and Sniper players to lean on this comp a little more. Other notable mentions in terms of comps would be the Moro Lucio Monkey comp, which is still very popular as an attempted counter to a lot of poke or Pharah comps, and there's probably going to be the default swap for teams that rely a lot on the rush comps. We're also still seeing map-specific strats in places like Havana and Lijiang Control Center, but the Rein, Monkey and Ball comps are really the main ones at the moment. So, coming into Overwatch League Season 4, the overarching meta playstyle is one of decisive cooldown trades, with very clear and discrete uptime and downtime phases. Less pressure to be getting constant value, more freedom to go for surprise flanks and plays with bursts of potential. The game has been moving in this direction for a while, but it's reached a point where every comp reflects this playstyle, and every team is focusing on pulling it off. The other thing teams will be focusing on is really embracing that tempo mindset. Now that there haven't been game-changing balance patches for a while, and no new heroes added since Echo, every team has a pretty similar understanding of the popular comps and potential matchups, meaning the basic gameplay skill gap should be fairly tighter than usual, which means that nailing this mindset about control of the tempo is more and more important. The teams that can figure this out will dominate, but it is an incredibly hard thing to build if your team environment isn't ready for it. Overall though, I'm really looking forward to the season. I think the game's in a genuinely good state to play, watch and analyze. I'm going to be cheering for my boy Shu. I'm super excited for this Toby and Alarm support duo as well. Avril's finally in as a caster too. It's going to be good.